Jay DeCarey.
I'm Devin DeCarey.
Today we are going to be talking, of course, about music again. But we're going to touch on a genre we haven't touched much on, and that's country music.
Oof, country music. What is our history with country music? Do you do a lot of listening to it?
I have different times in my life where I listen to it more than any other kind of music. So it kind of ebbs and flows with me as far as all of my music listening intake over the years. I will say for country music, one of the most interesting things about it is I think it has the most drastic and notable evolution in that it seems to change and continually be evolving and in notable steps that are not really synonymous with any other genre of music. Yes, it's of course pop music has changed over the year, rock music, all these things have changed, but country music has this distinction of being these very specific levels of different types of music, and what was popular and considered country music seemed to change almost every decade.
Right. Country music is very attached to its roots. I think that helped it as it evolved because as the artists of the day wanted to innovate country music, they always had a reference point. They always knew what to go back to. It was very steeped in the tradition of the bluegrass and the mountain music back in the time. And I think that aided it in its evolution, whereas rock music didn't have as much that as country music had.
I think the birthplace of country music, you have to go back to the 20s.
Yeah.
And I say that because that was the first time when people started playing it on the radio. There started being records or recordings of country music being played on a regular basis. And of course it had a big following, particularly in the South, and grew up from that. But in those days, and those people listening to this music just called it music because that's what they listened to. And of course, when it kind of entered mainstream or branched out into radio, it got its roots, like you said, dug in and was what was known as country music, though it went by many different names, particularly very early in its iteration.
Yeah. So people just called it music. And back in the early days, when LA basically they were like, we want to record this music from the country, they called it mountain music because it was music from people that lived in the mountains. And you had this family called the Carter family, who went around and they collected all this music from all these different areas and from all these different kinds of people too. There were poor white folks and there were black folks, and they were collecting music from all over the place. And they went to LA and played it all into a microphone, and that was the first country music. And the Carter family were the first really popular ones to collect all this music and save all this. Basically, it was folk music.
Jimmy Rogers was another one, and I think he collaborated with them quite a bit when they were younger.
Yeah. So, and then from there, it was just a constant evolution. It kept sort of this country music name, even though it was sort of an early version of modern bluegrass. And it wouldn't be modern bluegrass until you had Bill Skaggs play the banjo in the three-finger style. Now all of a sudden you have modern bluegrass, and the mountain music of old, which was called country music back then, isn't really modern country music. It's really an old version of modern bluegrass.
And I think most people today would consider that just bluegrass. It was they completely forget the country. And it wasn't until the maybe 30s and 40s when it basically began to branch out and really be known as country music, as far as becoming a part of the American lexicon, a part of something that was associated with America.
Right.
That's where this music was born. Rockabilly was kind of born from that, and Eddie Arnold is an example of that. And this is, of course, a little bit prior to the cowboy and western.
Mm-hmm. Obviously, the early innovators of country music, the early presenters of country music, they established sort of a general baseline. Like, if you want country music, you need guitar, banjo, and you don't really need a heavy. You can play the rhythms, get away with playing the rhythms on just those string instruments altogether. Sometimes they'd have drums. And then, it was being presented on the radio, and country music has a huge history with radio because as country music was coming into its own, the Great Depression hit.
Yes.
And nobody had money for records, but what they could get was a radio. And
the Grand Ole Opry.
The Grand Ole Opry happened.
I think it started like in the mid-20s, but it really got a foothold during the Great Depression, during the 30s and the 40s.
Yep.
And the World War I and II eras. Not one, but World War II era. Really kind of, it helped launch country music into being, what it was as an an accepted form of, music that you'd hear on the radio.
Yes. And from here you have another unique sound of country music being developed, which is the country duet. And you had bands and partners like the Stanley Brothers and the Louvin Brothers on the Grand Ole Opry singing every week. And they developed this specific country duet style, which is a very interesting style of duet because at any moment's time you're called to go from unison straight up to octaves. Like it's a huge, there's lots, the voices are moving very separate from each other, and then they come together very quickly. And it was sort of, and country melodies are sort of getting their foothold too. Because what's interesting about country music, of traditional country music, it was melodies sort of sat within a pocket and then flowed sort of river-like in that pocket. So it would explore a pocket. So if you sang up high, you explore around here, and then you sang in this pocket down here, and then you went up to this pocket over here, and it was always sort of, it felt like a river flowing down. Whereas the pop music or the popular music of the time, it was all about creating a big leap and then filling in that leap with a bunch of notes that lay in between. So somewhere is an octave, but then you fill in the octave over the rainbow. Like that was the style. And country would adopt that style when it started to be popularized in the 50s. When rock and roll was coming to be, and country music wanted to compete with rock and roll, and so they sort of tried to become sort of the conservative rock and roll, and that was LA country music. And then you had the country rebels who stuck to their traditional roots, and that was in the 50s. That was people like Willie Nelson, Merle Haggard, Johnny Cash, Buck Owens, that kind of thing.
The whole point of this generation, at least from a part of what the American audience heard, was this kind of this changing of the instrumentation, the Cowboys coming into it, the big band influence, okay, with the 30s and 40s, which kind of influenced a whole new people to gravitate towards country music, or at least make it part of what they did. So it had an influence on folk music. Bluegrass got a little bit more catchy, got a little bit more upbeat. Yeah. Even gospel music. Mm-hmm. A lot. You can date a lot of. I mean, we give a lot of credit to gospel music as being soul driven, but it really got its roots in country music, and particularly when the big band influence hit during the 40s, it was kind of this mesh, and you started, people being able to rock out to the choir singing at the top, and that really had a lot more to do with country music than soul. It developed over the time to be more of a soulful thing, but maybe that's a podcast for another day.
Yeah, it's interesting. All right, so we went through the 30s and 50s.
So then there's another big G. You started to touch on it a little bit, that third generation.
Yeah.
When you're talking about the people, and this is where country music, I don't want to say it got lost, because it never went anywhere. But there were people, artists in particular, who like to pull all different parts. And this is in the 50s and the 60s, really, who were, to country fans, country artists, but not necessarily everybody viewed them as country artists, because they were just artists that did music. And I'm talking about your Burl Ives, your John Denvers, your Gordon Lightfoot, people who had a reputation in modern mainstream music, but at their core were country music. Yeah. And in a way, I felt like that was good. That was good for country music, but it also kind of blurred the line on what was considered country.
Right. I don't know if John Denver or even like a country fan would put John Denver in that camp, but what the fact remains that John Denver was popularizing the traditional styles of country music, which at the time were sort of
So are you saying you don't think he's a country artist?
No, I think he is.
Yeah, I do too.
But I don't think most people think that of John Denver, which is a shame, because John Denver really preserved those traditions of country music. And when country music is being modernized, so to speak, whenever it's being modernized, it always loses its way in one form or fashion. In the 50s, it was when electric instruments were being introduced.
Yes.
And you're starting to move away from your traditional roots of all acoustic instruments, right?
So let's that's an example of somebody who truly was a country artist and should be called a country artist.
Yes.
There's other people that get looped or pulled into that genre that I don't necessarily think it's really country music. And maybe it's a little bit rockabilly. It's a I don't know. It's whatever pop music, rock music, whatever. And they've kind of infused some of that country, but I don't consider them a country artist at heart. Yeah. One of the standouts for me would be Johnny Cash.
You don't think he's country?
I don't think he's country. No, okay. I think he's definitely more rock and roll. Although you definitely have the influence of the country music.
I see.
You can see it. You know, his songs tell stories. His music follows a lot of the trademark country music staples.
Yeah.
Like that's a country song, and you can list all these reasons as to why. It's a great story. It's a narrative. It's the easy instrumentations going with, you know, just telling a story, somebody telling a story. Mm-hmm. It follows a lot of those rules of country music, but it does branch a little bit more out into the rock and roll, the rockabilly audience. But there's other ones that were kind of in that same group that were definitely more pop music, like Buddy Holly. Mm-hmm. You can see Johnny Cash and Buddy Holly playing together, but you would definitely not call Buddy Holly a country artist.
No, you wouldn't. Yeah, that's an interesting point, and it just goes to show.
I mean, even Elvis Presley dived into it a little bit, but you don't consider him.
Oh, certainly not
a country artist. So yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, it is. That is really interesting. This sort of gets into the nitty gritty. What really makes country music? Because then, if we were to really fast forward to modern day, a lot of people there's a huge outcry against this sort of modern style, the most modern style of country music. Most people consider it just straight up pop. Do you know what I'm saying?
Well, that kind of developed more in the 70s and 80s.
Yeah.
Which we can dive into that if you want to.
Sure.
One of the other people I would just to round out my whole little group of people that we were talking about.
Please do.
Is Ray Charles. Ray Charles has some great country hits.
Yeah.
Never going to be considered a country artist.
That's true.
Just because.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that because, you know, he's a piano player and he was black and he kind of ran in that circuit. But he's one of those ones that was doing his own thing.
That's true.
You know, he wasn't basically selling his music to just a black audience. He was selling it to everybody.
Right.
And the fact that he could even cross over even into country, which was a predominantly white audience, particularly back then, was just a powerful reminder of country music does not necessarily have to come just from a country artist. It doesn't have to follow all these rules.
That's true.
But to your point, the popularization...
Yeah.
And the country pop craze, which you can kind of start dating back to the 70s.
Yeah.
And the one that I really... Well, there's two.
Yeah.
One male, one female. I remember Willie Nelson.
Okay, yeah.
And, you know, who doesn't know that song On the Road Again, right?
Right.
Everybody knows that song, even people that don't listen to country music.
Right.
The other one is Dolly Parton.
Yeah.
And she made and it's kind of interesting with her, though, because she is still at her core a country artist.
Yeah.
Although she made a calculated choice to reach a more mainstream audience and took her music in that direction.
Yeah.
Here You Come Again was like her first pop release that was meant to be a pop song, and I think she held that line pretty close because it was like the right amount of pop to gain the success in the pop industry that she was looking for. Mm-hmm. Yet I don't feel like she alienated her country fans at the same time.
Definitely not.
She was very good about... I mean, there's a few cases where you can point out, you know, like, where'd that go? Where'd that song come from? But at their core, they're country songs that she writes.
Right. And then the country music, it's always... what did I write here? I wrote, authenticity is the key when you're writing the country music. It needs to feel real and authentic. And I think people miss that with a lot of country music, a lot of modernized country music.
Yeah.
And the ones that did it well, who modernized country music well, you're talking about Dolly Parton and later on...
Kenny Rogers.
You're talking Garth Brooks, Alan Jackson. Those artists... What they did was and we can talk. I'll talk all about this when we get into our top 5 today. But what they did was they supplemented their storytelling with very important keys of storytelling. They weren't just telling stories. They're doing very clever things with their stories. And I'll get
you're jumping
into that.
to even the next step, like past the 70s and 80s. because Garth Brooks and Alan Jackson, they came out big in the late 80s, almost 90s, really 90s.
Yeah.
And so I felt that there was another transition, whereas in the 70s and 80s, the idea was we want to make it accessible to everybody. So if this is what I have to do to reach those audiences, that's what I'm going to do. And I think the 90s specifically started the era of unapologetic country artists.
Got it.
We are going to play country music.
Yeah.
Whether you like us or not. You say to Garth Brooks and Alan Jackson, those are two very key examples of people who stayed in their lane, did not move from country music, and yet still reached broader audiences than just the core country music fans.
That's right. And the world, maybe that has to do with the world becoming more connected. And now these country artists, because they can reach their specific audience more readily, they have the freedom to do that and still be popular, to be unapologetically country music and still be popular.
The other thing that needs to be pointed out is that the 90s saw such an infusion of female artists, so many more.
That's true.
Than what was in the 80s. And of course, Dolly Parton and the Reba McEntires, and there was obviously a few big female stars, and there were others, but there were not that many of name, not many that had the big name like or the notoriety of Reba McEntire and Dolly Parton and Barbara Mandrell and all these people that people knew their names. You can name like maybe a handful of them, but yet you have bands and guy artists you can create endless list about.
Sure.
So that's the other thing that really, really happened in the 90s, because think about the names that popped out. You've got your Faith Hills, who, of course, we're talking about pop music. She did dive a little bit more into that. Yeah. But I think she kind of took the Dolly Parton. That was a concerted effort that she took to reach those audiences. But I just think about even who's popular today. I think without that 90s infusion of the female artists, there would be no Carrie Underwood.
Yeah, no.
The most successful American Idol artist to come out of that franchise is a country artist, Carrie Underwood.
That's right.
So that's just goes to show you that there's a lot more power in that kind of music than people realize.
Yeah, absolutely. Country music is sort of not stigmatized, but it definitely has its audience. It's definitely either you love it or you hate it kind of a thing. Do you know what I'm saying? And I wonder what happened to country music along the way, because there was a time when country music was definitely trying to be something that everyone can listen to. And now you're at this point where country music is definitely, I either love it or I hate it.
Right.
And I think...
And that's where I think country music kind of stood its ground and said, no, we're going to be country.
Yeah. It did say that, but then there were also those who were trying too hard. And
I'm talking specifically about the 90s, though, there.
Okay,
so,
I see.
Because there definitely is, what you're getting into, I think, is the more modern, what we know from the 2000s going forward.
Yes.
Because there are endless examples of that.
Yeah.
Beyond the fact that the collaborations that happened just among country and mainstream artists. I remember Nelly and Tim McGraw getting together to do that song over and over. So, I mean, just things like that. Those wouldn't play in the 80s.
That's true.
It was definitely more segregated, if you want to say that.
Yeah.
But there's definitely more of the pop element, more than ever, in today's country music. I mean, the one name that stands out, the little girl, Taylor Swift.
Right.
She's the epitome of the country artist evolving into what she is today.
Right. And I think that's just a little bit too far from that. This is just my personal take. I think that venture is a little too far from the country.
So when did she stop being country?
When did she stop?
Just curious.
Oh, I don't know. I think she was never country from the start.
Really?
I really think that, because it ventures too far away from the roots of country music. But maybe that's too hard, because she is telling a story, right, in her music.
Yes.
She's telling a relatable story, and it's authentic. You cannot say that Taylor's music is not authentic. It's very authentic. So I guess her early stuff you could say was country music, but then there were people. There are lots of examples of artists who, like, country music, it tells a story, and pop music, it sort of tells you what we're gonna do.
Most of those country music, female artists in particular, definitely gravitated to the pop country, part because it broadened that audience. I mean, there's countless names of people who did that. Of course, Reba McEntire, because she's always evolving with her sound. But you've got your Faith Hills, I already mentioned, Martina McBride, Leanne Rimes, Mindy McCready, Shania Twain.
Yeah.
So these are just, people that were established country artists that everybody knows their name.
Yeah.
And that was not, I made the comment about, you can maybe on one hand, you could have named the top country artists in the 80s. You move into the 2000s and beyond, and you've got that unlimited list again. But I think a lot of that has to do with the fact of being crossover accessible.
Right. Okay. There's so much more we could talk about.
This is really a hard subject to condense into, and maybe we'll have a future broadcast where we break up different types of music within the genre,
like a part 2.
Yeah, or just hey, let's tackle this generation of music.
This is insane,
and move on.
Yeah,
because you could really go on for a long time about country music.
This is really too broad of a topic to tackle in 20 minutes. But we'll definitely have to do a part 2.
The other thing that also kind of came in with this female infusion is this what I heard a couple people refer to as bro country.
Yeah,
they're these bands that got together, or these what do you call them? These collaborations between people. I'm talking like Blake Shelton and Jason Aldean and Florida Georgia Line. There's just this whole group of these. It's almost like the girls kind of overtook things for a little while, and the guys came up and go, "Wait a minute, we're still here."
Yeah,
but I like it. And then of course you take it forward, and you've got modern day pop artists. Right now there's a hit song with Billy Ray Cyrus and Nas X.
Yeah.
So what does that tell you? It's just kind of, country is one of these things that I think can permeate other genres and yet still retain its countryness.
I think at its best it does that.
Yeah.
I think at its best it does that. But country music, it needs to be attached to its roots in some way. And I think the gold standard of sort of modernized country music, the gold standard of that would be Garth Brooks, which leads us into our top 5.
Yes.
We're going to do top 5 Garth Brooks today. And, I had trouble. I had to borrow CDs from you because this guy, he's not on Spotify. He's not on YouTube. So I had to borrow a CD. And this, he's really worth it. If you think you don't like country music and you haven't listened to Garth Brooks, you haven't given country music a fair shake. Because this guy, he's the gold standard of modernized country music. I think that if you're going to write country music today, it needs to incorporate the elements that Garth Brooks is using in his music.
So you're a traditionalist when it comes to your country music.
Oh, absolutely. Okay. I think the best country music is old. But when you get to the new stuff, you really should be sounding a lot like Dolly Parton and Garth Brooks. And if you don't want to go super old, if you want to go like super old school, that's awesome because old school country music is my favorite. But if you're gonna do modern, you need to borrow some tips from Garth Brooks. So here we go, top 5 Garth Brooks.
And I have no idea how many times I'm going to say this as we do more and more podcasts.
Yeah,
but this one was the hardest.
Okay.
I was been doing my research on this for a week or so,
yeah,
and it was almost every day I dive back into the Garth catalog and come back up. Well, no, I really need to include that song. Oh no, but what about that one?
Yeah,
because I think if this was a top 10, it would have been a lot easier.
Yeah,
because I'll say this at the beginning of this exercise. I had half on one side and half on the other. That part was easy.
Yeah.
That definitely and these are definitely some definites and some maybes,
Sure.
So, but breaking that down to 5 was pretty rough. So throw me your first. I'm really curious about you because you weren't like really well versed in Garth Brooks music, were you? You knew his biggest hits, but
I listened to him a lot growing up.
Because
you were listening to him. So I do remember. I do know.
Okay.
I'm fairly well versed in Garth Brooks myself.
So throw me your number 5.
All right. Number 5, Friends in Low Places.
Yeah.
Knocked it in at number 5.
Yeah.
Which just tells you, everyone knows that song, and that'll just tell you just how good this guy is. That my 5th favorite song by him is that song, because that song is amazing.
It's probably his most well-known.
Yes.
Everybody knows that song, like you said.
Yeah.
The whole feeling of that song is just a great song.
Yes.
It's this camaraderie, this great. And I have to put a little spin on it. I don't care if you're listening to this one or the live version. They're both great songs. I moved it further up in my list, so I'm just going to tell you right now, it's my number 2.
Okay.
I wouldn't tell you if it's my number 1, because I'll leave that for the reveal.
Sure.
But it was my number 2, just because I kept coming back to that song. That's a song that it doesn't matter how many times I've heard it, I never get tired of listening to it.
Yeah.
And particularly in the live version, of course, a lot of you Garth Brooks fans know that one of the things he did, particularly with this album, he had 2 big hits off this album, The Thunder Rolls and Friends in Low Places.
Yeah.
But he did the funny thing where I think in the video for Thunder Rolls, he added a 3rd verse. That's not on the original version. Yeah, fans just love.
I've heard
and
of
then
that.
he also did the same thing with Friends in Low Places in the live version. And he never released it until he did, eventually release a live album, and then you got that whole 3rd verse that the fans just go nuts over. Yeah. But just the fact that in the live version particularly, the song starts out, you can hear the dull roar of the crowd in the background, and that guitar strum, those 3 notes, dun, 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 dun,
Yeah.
And then everybody just goes nuts. You know what that song's going to be. And that the testament that he can play 3 notes.
Yes.
And everybody knows what that song is going to be and goes nuts over just the first 3 notes played, and he pauses. Is awesome. It speaks to how great that song is. So yes, I totally endorse your number 5. My number 5, though, is a song called That Summer. And it's very much... It gives me the same feels almost as Friends in Low Places, and that it's very nostalgic feeling. It's a more personal song. This is a song about a guy in his youth that's in a summer work program and basically hooks up with an older woman, and that's his first experience.
Right.
I like the honesty of the song. I love just the emotion tied behind a simple story.
Yeah.
Again, it's the narrative. What have we been talking about with country music? It's all about the narrative, right?
Right.
So it's a great narrative of a very short story.
Yeah.
Which is harder to do, I think. It's easy to string along all these events that may happen over and make a song out of it, but to take a song about one person's experience in one evening and then him reflecting back on it and making that a narrative of a whole song is pretty talented, and Garth Brooks just pulls it off well.
Yeah, that song is great. It is on my list, but I'll leave it for when it comes up. The thing about what Garth does is he uses storytelling to its fullest. A lyric is never wasted. In Friends in Low Places, it's a vocal swinging. There's vocal swinging. It makes it fun to sing. It's almost like a drinking song. It sounds like a drinking song.
Yeah, it is.
And this is a consistent thing in all of his music. And we'll get into that as we get further up the list.
So what's your number 4 then?
My number 4 is The River. And this is less about the story and more about the message. It's a simple... He's conveying a simple message, and he's using... but he's not just saying, like, you ought to... whatever the message is, you ought to love your neighbor. What he's doing is he's giving you a simple message that's easy to grasp, and he's adding poetic imagery to it. So it is not merely that this is how you ought to live. It is that he's pairing that with poetic imagery, simple messages that are easy to understand. Country is at its best when it can strike that balance of simple messages with
profound thoughts.
Profound thoughts.
Yeah.
I guess, yeah.
That's, and that's one of the ones that kept flipping in and out of my list. It didn't actually make my list, but it's interesting because my number 4 is the one that it kind of took the place of.
Okay.
Which is The Dance.
Yeah.
I kept going back and forth as to whether I wanted The Dance or The River.
Yeah.
It seemed like, because they're both very, message driven, basically. Of course, The Dance being, there's similar messages, and, be careful with the choices you make, and be sure that, you spend your life doing what's right, because that's what's going to matter at the end.
Right.
That's very much The River.
Yeah.
The Dance is basically almost in the same realm as that, except it's don't waste those moments, because you never know when they're going to be gone.
Right.
And so the indefiniteness of life as a theme is just something I think it's a super relatable song. The fact that it's his signature song, The Dance.
Yeah.
And the fact that he got his signature song on his first album release is just amazing.
Yeah.
So that doesn't always happen. Dolly Parton, it took how many years till she wrote Coat of Many Colors, but that's her signature song now. She had been writing and releasing albums for years and years, But when that was released, that really became her signature song.
Right.
So I think The Dance is his signature song, and that's why I included it on this list. And I think that's what just gave it a little bit more of an edge of The River.
Yeah.
But if that hadn't been the case with The Dance, I think The River would have been in its place.
Got it. So that was your 4.
That was my number 4.
What was your 3?
So my 3 is Ain't Going Down Till the Sun Comes Up. Mm-hmm. And this is just pure fun.
Yes.
This is like as country rap as you can get without it being rap.
Yeah.
Ed Sheeran actually perfected this in pop music in his album, and that's that fast talk sing.
Yeah.
He's not really rapping. He's kind of singing, but he's running out those lyrics so fast.
Yes.
And just the feel of this song is it's going to be fast right out. It starts right off with the guitar riff. It's also probably one of his most rock songs that he has.
That's fair.
But yet it's still country.
Yeah.
Because it's got all the other elements to it. And, just the minute that it takes off, I just want to sing along with the song,
Yes.
Even though, it took me forever to figure out all the words of the song and sing it as fast and keep up with it and keep time. But it's funny, even to this day, I can do it.
Nice.
If I have the music. So it's pretty fun.
That's cool.
One of my most favorite songs to sing along to. It's a great driving road trip song.
Yeah.
And, I had to include it in this list. And I think that's why I threw it in number 3, because it didn't necessarily... That doesn't necessarily mean that number 3 is better than 4 and 5. Mm-hmm. I just knew it belonged on the list, but I couldn't rate it in because it kind of is its standalone. So I threw it right in the middle.
Right. So that was actually my number 2. Ain't Going Down.
What's your number 3?
What Ain't Going Down does is it has that lyrical urgency to it.
Yeah.
Which matches the urgency of the story.
And the music.
Yeah. Everything is working together. The lyrics match the melody. So that's another thing you got to do. Don't waste lyrics. What is the melody doing, and how can you incorporate that into your lyrics, or vice versa? What are the lyrics doing, and how can you incorporate that into your melody? Garth Brooks never wastes anything, as evidenced by, I already did number 2, so we got to go back to my number 3, which is The Thunder Rolls. This is how you can take your country song up to an 11, because this is the best use of subtext in any of his songs. And subtext is super powerful in storytelling. And it's something that Dolly Parton does in Jolene. She sets the stage. She gives you a lot of details, and then she just gives you just enough to tell the rest of the story. Just very barely enough. So it's not just red hair, it's auburn hair. It's not just white skin, it's ivory skin. It's not just green eyes, they're emerald eyes of green. So as she sets the stage, then she throws in just enough to give you the rest of the story.
So how is he doing that here?
I cannot compete with you, Jolene.
Yeah.
And the subtext is, wow, okay, so she's very not confident in herself, and maybe this man isn't the best for her. And wow, all this stuff. So the Thunder Rolls does this amazingly, because what it does is it sets the stage. It's raining outside. You still don't know what's happening yet. There's thunder. She's inside. Okay, she's looking out the window. Who's she looking for? And then she says, and then he doesn't even say that there's a man until the very last line, where he says, praying to God that it's the weather that's kept him out all night. And now you know what the whole song is about with just one line. One line tells you the whole song, and you put it all together in your head, because that's subtext. It's what he's withholding from you, what he doesn't need to tell you, what you can put together yourself. So the Thunder Rolls is and of course the chorus is just amazing. He loves those punchy offbeat chords where it's like dun dun dun, where it happens on the and of a chord instead of on the beat. It happens on the and, one and like that. He does that a lot. He does that in the Thunder Rolls. He does that in a lot of his songs when he wants to add energy to it, and it's a great technique. So that made it to number 3. And if you want to write a country song, listen to that song and incorporate subtext into your story. Because you're writing a story, because you're writing a country song. Let's not be like a pop song here and be like, oh, here's what we're going to do. We're going to go out and party all night and it's going to be fun. It's like, no, that's not a country song. That's a pop song. Tell me what happened that night.
Well, then it's interesting that you're
song.
saying that, and this whole thing about subtext, because this is one of the songs I talked about where he added that extra third verse. In this case, he didn't do it. I think he does it with the live version as well.
Yes.
But when the video came out, it had a mysterious third verse that popped in there.
Yeah.
And it basically takes the narrative of basically kind of this couple that is dealing with this issue, and of course her brokenheartedness over realizing what he's done.
Yeah.
And the third verse kind of takes the whole thing and flips the story on its head. and that it talks about the narrative of her getting the gun. And the video is very graphic in detailing the story and how it plays out.
Crazy.
And she basically is at the point, that's it, I'm done with you.
Yeah.
So it's not like this is like a new revelation. And something about the subtext about her waiting and hoping she's not right.
Yeah.
You kind of get the feeling even then that this has happened before.
Yeah.
Because that's her first place that she's going to.
That's right.
That she thinks is going to happen. And then, of course, he takes this whole dramatic thing. There was a lot of people that were up in arms about this, as far as, the violence that it, portrayed and whatnot. Man. But that has a lot to do with that third verse in the video that goes along with that song. But that is a great song. That one did not make my list though, but I do like that song.
Yeah, I love that song.
It's definitely one of my favorites. That again was one of the ones on the good side and was popping in and out. And,
yes,
and like where does that fall in the overall thing? I think we both covered our number twos in different ways.
Yeah, I did. Ain't Going Down.
You did what?
Ain't Going Down.
And my number two was Friends in Low Places, which we've already talked about.
Yeah.
So my number one.
Yeah.
And this will be a testament to a podcast we did before.
Yeah.
About great singers not being great singers but great songwriters.
Sure.
And that's the great Bob Dylan.
That's right.
Who wrote To Make You Feel My Love.
Yeah.
Which is my favorite Garth Brooks song.
There you go.
And I think he does the best version of it.
There you go.
Even better than Bob Dylan's version.
That's
Many
fair.
people have done it. Adele is an honorable mention.
Yeah.
She does a really good job with the song. But ultimately my favorite is the Garth Brooks version. It's just steeped in feeling.
Yeah.
I say this all the time. It's the feels that really get to me. Something that's going to make me feel something. And no matter... You can't help but feel the romantic twinge in your heart when you hear this song. And you really... I guess the best word is to submit yourself to what the song is telling you. And the angst that he's feeling about this person. And all that he would go to just to express to let her know this is how he's feeling. Also, just a side note, this was used extensively in the movie Hope Floats, which very much has that theme running through it, and Garth Brooks recorded and they used it in the soundtrack. But I don't use this word very often to describe music because it very rarely fits the full impact of this world, of this word, but it's beautiful. Yeah. It is a straight beautiful song.
It is.
And again, credit where it's due for Bob Dylan writing such an incredible song, but super kudos to Garth for his interpretation and the way he delivered it. It is the perfect song.
That could have easily made my list. The only reason it didn't make my list is because I thought I was cheating, because Bob Dylan did write it. But that is an amazing song that I could listen to over and over again.
Yeah.
But that's a great number one. My number one was actually one you talked about earlier. I didn't want to reveal it. It was That Summer.
Yeah, I wouldn't have revealed the number one either. So yeah, that's a great song, isn't it?
I love that song. It's same kind of song as the Thunder Rolls, where it sets the stage well. It gives you a lot of detail. And here's the thing about good storytelling: don't tell a story. And that's a weird thing to say.
Yeah, I think I understand what you're saying.
You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Don't tell it.
Let it unfold.
Yeah, let it unfold. Give as little information as possible and let your audience put together the rest. You already don't have a lot of words in a song. So use as few as possible to tell the story, but set the stage. And he does that with That Summer. He gives a lot of background, background, but musically he balances that. I think the lyrics in the Thunder Rolls are better, but I think the music is a lot better in That Summer. Those punchy chords are used again on offbeat, serving as a way to carry the chorus through. The vocal flow varies within the chorus perfectly. The end of the phrase is a perfect way to bring the chorus full circle. A lot of people, they'll end with like a single word at the end of the chorus, but he fits in a lot of extra. It's like a mini chord progression right there at the end of the chorus. It really helps drive the chorus all the way through. The energy is highest in the chorus again. It's just a very well...
Need to feel the thunder.
Yeah. It's just, it pulls it all the way through. So, I love that song.
That song too, one of the I love clever lyrics, or just lyrics that are well done, or speak to me, or whatever you want to say that,
Yeah.
In this particular song, that's one of my favorite things about the song, and that's not always true of music, is the lyrical content. And I particularly like the fact that he paints this narrative at the beginning, and then you realize at the end of the song that he's remembering this.
Yeah.
It's not happening in real time. He's remembering back, and he remembers it so vividly that he remembers all those details, like the hands of leather turning to velvet and things like that are just very poetic and very well structured lyrically. In fact, one of my favorite structures is just kind of, some people might consider it just a throwaway line, where he talks about going back to that time whenever he sees the wind blowing in the wheat, and making him smile. I just think that was just an incredibly smart thing to tie in all of the emotion, how much this moment he recalls, how much it affected him, and who he was. And I think that's just great. That's something everybody can identify, even if you don't identify with that specific scenario.
Yes, it adds a huge weight of authenticity to the song as well, because he's talking about a personal experience and remembering it. And that's another, probably the third thing I talked about that you need in your country song. So we talked about subtext, we talked about narrative, and we talked about authenticity.
Yeah.
And that song has all three. All of Garth's songs have all three.
Yeah, I'm really surprised that we had as many in the same. We had three.
Yeah, three
matches,
or four maybe. That Summer, Ain't Going Down,
and Friends in
Low Places. What about the Thunder Rolls? Oh, you didn't.
I didn't have Thunder. I had Dance and Make You Feel My Love, and you had But again, yours were honorable mentions, even the ones you picked, because there were ones that I struggled with going back and forth. Yes. Particularly the River and the Dance. I kept going back and forth between those two songs.
Yes.
But anyway, that was a good top 5 discussion. That was pretty good.
Yeah.
Especially since the Garth Brooks catalog is so vast, it's really hard to come up with the top 5.
Yeah, it is.
Considering he had so many great hits.
You got to listen to Garth Brooks. If you've not listened to Garth Brooks, you haven't given country music a chance. So if you listen to Garth Brooks and you don't like it, you officially don't like country music.
Yeah, exactly.
But you can't say that until you've listened to him. So buy a CD of his. Buy his Greatest Hits album. Anything. Give it a listen. This guy's a legend.
Okay, so we are going to move on now to our homework discussion.
Homework assignments.
I was given the homework discussion of Dr. John, who basically is a blues musician at his core.
Yeah.
But I came to find out, I learned a lot with this one, which is funny because I knew a little bit about him. I mean, he was a musical prodigy at 16, went professional at 16, got signed to a label as a singer-songwriter. Mm-hmm. And, of course, the one song that when you say Dr. John, the one I always go back to is Right Place, Wrong Time, because that's the song that I think most people know by him. I think it was his only top 10 mainstream hit. Yeah. So, of course, I know that one. And then, again, he was just a figure that I knew as a blues singer in the back of my head. A couple times he hit my cognitive thinking through the years was that he's got that unmistakable voice, right?
Yeah.
He's got the Dr. John voice that nobody else has.
That's right.
And so, of course, that made him a really big standout when he did the theme to the Disney movie, Princess and the Frog. Mm-hmm. I forget the name of the theme. It's like something about down in New Orleans or something like that. But you hear his voice and you know it's him. Oh, that's Dr. John, that's smart. It's a movie that takes place in New Orleans, and that's where he's from, and where a lot of his music stems from. And the other Disney one, as I'll remember, is the 101 Dalmatians live action movie. He did the Cruella de Vil song at the end.
Oh, he did.
So yeah. So those are. It's funny because I know that one song. Again, it was a little bit before. I was a little young when that song really came out. I think it was early '70s.
Yeah.
And so I was a little young, but I grew up knowing that song. Yeah. And that's the one I always remembered. And then for that to hit me on those levels later years, I really did not know much more about him.
Yeah.
Which was made it kind of interesting because people would say, "Oh yeah, I know who Dr. John is," but. And then I sat there, I'm like, I can literally only think of one song.
Yeah.
How is that possible?
Yeah.
And then, of course, diving into it, my takeaway from him was how good he was at fusing his blues music with other types of music.
Yes. Yeah.
And again, at his core, still a blues musician, but he did it so effortlessly. It's like he brought... To varying degrees, he brought his blues into whatever he was doing.
Yeah.
It never overpowered. It's not like he did a blues version of anything.
Yeah.
But yet he was able to just do it. Like even his most popular song that I talked about, the Right Place, Wrong Time, that definitely has a psychedelic rock feel to it. But you can feel the blues, the undercurrent of the blues riffs underneath it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's an example of taking like what is considered a psychedelic rock song, but yet being done by this blues artist. Another one, he infused pop sound And when he did his rendition of Let Him In, which he did for a Paul McCartney tribute album.
Right.
So that's a Paul McCartney song, and he did that. Definitely his most pop song that I've heard him do.
Yeah.
But still unmistakably him. Unmistakably Dr. John.
Yes.
And infusing the pop. One of my favorites, though. He did another one with who's the other New Orleans guy? Harry Connick Jr.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
Do you know what it means to miss New Orleans? Great. I mean, that is a jazz song, but somehow he brings his own thing to the table with Harry Connick Jr.
Yeah.
Which is just great. That's a great one. But I think my absolute favorite was I'd Rather Go Blind with Etta James.
Okay.
Which, of course, she's a soul artist.
Yeah.
And he brings soul to that song like you wouldn't believe. Yeah. You wouldn't think so when you just think of his voice in general. He's definitely more of that New Orleans blues, what some people refer to as voodoo blues, kind of a vibe.
Yeah.
And that's just kind of what I always thought about him in my mind. But, doing the research for this, I came across that song with Etta James, I'd Rather Go Blind. Just absolutely stunning. Perfect partner to sing with. Just the great feeling that he has and his voice behind it. So this was a fun homework exercise because it took me from I know about him to wow.
Yeah. I'm glad.
How much did I not know?
Yeah.
Much more than I did, as it turns out. But that was fun. Thank you.
Absolutely. I'm glad I got a lot out of it. I stumbled across Dr. John myself. I didn't know him very well, but people. It was left on a computer in the music lab at my college, and I just, who's this? And it was him playing Aiko Aiko, and I'm like, oh, this guy's great. Someone should sign this guy.
Little did you know.
Yeah. So anyway, that was that. My homework was Susan Tadeshi, who's this blues country artist, really. Yeah. She's blues and country. She has that character to her voice, that female country artist character to her voice. But I personally, as I was listening to her, and I was listening to her more and more, maybe I was spoiled by listening to country legends like Garth Brooks and Dolly Parton. But I preferred it when she went full blues.
Yes. I think at her core, that's what she is.
Yes, I that's what I preferred. When it was less country and more blues, she really shines, and her voice really shines. I was listening to her when she's singing the blues, and I'm like, I really love your voice when you sing that style. That was my personal takeaway. There's a bluesy, free-flowing rhythm to how she sings. She uses an impressive amount of instruments in most of her songs. There's usually a lot of instruments that are weaving in and out.
Yeah.
Almost kind of like it was scored, like it was a score of like 10 different instruments, but they don't all play at the same time like an orchestra, but they weave in and out like an orchestra might do. There's lots of fair amount of call and response, which is a common blues technique where it's like hi-de, hi-de, hi, and then you respond hi-de, hi-de, hi.
Hi-de, hi-de, ho.
Right, exactly. So that's call and response. That wasn't a blues song. I just gave an example. Maybe it is. Minnie the Moocher, is that a blues song, even though Cab Calloway isn't really a blues singer?
Yeah, I think so.
All right.
Yeah.
So I think she should go full on blues, but she's a talented singer, talented guitar player. And that was my takeaway.
Yeah, I'm a little surprised that she's more the country thing, because I thought she veered a little bit more into the jazz from time to time.
Yes, she did do that.
Yeah. But I guess she does do country now that I think about it. That's just a new insight I hadn't really given credit to.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I heard mostly country and blues when I was doing my research.
Okay.
But yeah, another unique voice. You gave me a lot of unique voice. The week before this was Billie Holiday.
Well, I'm going to give you another unique voice.
All right, what's my homework?
This one's a little bit more modern. You ready for this?
Yeah.
And I've got kind of a twist I want you to kind of come up with an opinion about.
Great, I love those.
This is about Tina Turner.
Tina Turner.
And so my end result that I want, and you can, just look into the whole scope of her career.
Sure.
But if you had to peg her into a genre, if you had to force her into a genre, what would it be?
All right.
And your reasons for that.
Reasons with what genre and why?
Yeah.
You got it.
What about me? What you got?
All right. You're getting a eclectic alternative rock band called They Might Be Giants.
Yes.
Yes. So they have done all kinds of work through the years. They're kind of like Bare Naked Ladies or Tally Hall, if you know who they are.
Yes.
But yeah, they might be giants. They've done tons of very eclectic bands. They'll sing about anything. They sang about how Istanbul is not Constantinople now. And that was like the lyrics. And it's less about, like, in that case, I think it's more about how the lyric sounds than it is the content of what is being said. Because no one really sings about that. I don't know.
I'm familiar with them, but I haven't, dived deeply into their music. So that'll be fun. That'll be a good thing to look into.
Yeah, they do sort of a mix of just fun, we're messing around music and serious alternative rock music. So... I say serious in quotes, as serious as that band can get. They're really good, though. Give them a listen.
Yeah.
All right. So I think that's the end of today.
The end of today. I know you guys are going to have comments about the country music because there was only so many things. Who do we miss? I know we
didn't mention
people.
George Strait.
Yeah, exactly.
or Conway Twitty. Fake news.
Yeah, so try not to be too hard on us. This is a loaded subject. So we tried to touch on a little bit of everything, and maybe we should have broken it down. But lessons for next time.
Yeah.
But thank you for listening, and we will catch you guys next time.
All right. So long.
Bye.